She never liked silence. Claire Monroe had always been someone who filled rooms with music, conversation, humming, anything. Silence made her skin crawl. It felt like a warning, like something was being withheld. So when she stepped into her late grandmother's house for the first time in 27 years, and it greeted her with a cold, breathless quiet, Claire instinctively turned on the old radio on the kitchen counter. It crackled, struggled, and settled on a faint oldies station playing Yesterday by the Beatles. She left it there. The house was still. Not peaceful, still, like a breath held too long. She stood in the kitchen doorway, looking into the living room where the late afternoon sun bled through dusty curtains. Everything was exactly as she remembered from childhood summers, the same grandfather clock, its brass face tarnished, the same floral couch no one was ever allowed to sit on, the same faint scent of lavender and something older, like time itself, had sunk into the walls. Barra, Vermont, had always been a small town wrapped in colder months. Even in spring the air bit. The house sat atop a gentle hill, just enough to give you a view of the valley and the houses stacked together below like toy blocks. Her grandmother had passed away the previous fall, leaving Claire the house in her will. No one else had wanted it. Her father hadn't even shown up to the funeral. Now Claire was back, unlocking ghosts with every creaking floorboard. She walked through the hallway, her boots thudding softly against the wood, the smell of age curling around her like fog. There were still plastic covers on the furniture in the guest room. Upstairs, she found her old bedroom untouched. The wallpaper with tiny yellow flowers was faded, peeling in the corners. The dresser had one drawer that always stuck, and when she pulled it open, it groaned like a throat clearing after years of silence. Inside, her childhood sketchbook, a set of crayons, and a photo. It was one she didn't remember being taken. A little girl with bright brown eyes, her hair in messy pigtails, holding a doll with one arm around its shoulder. Claire stared at the girl. That was her. Maybe age made memory slippery, but something about the photo felt off. She turned it over, no date, no handwriting, just the photo. It was nearly evening when the contractor arrived. His name was Jim Callahan, local, wiry, maybe late 50s. "You sure you want to start gutting the walls this close to winter?" he asked, pulling off his gloves and looking around the front room with a mix of nostalgia and suspicion. Claire smiled. "I want to make it livable, just the living room for now. There's mold behind the wallpaper." Jim nodded and began to peel back. The wallpaper came off in slow sheets, revealing cracked plaster underneath. Claire stepped outside to take a call from the university about an extension on her sabbatical. She'd taken 3 months off from teaching to work on her book, but in truth, she needed space. From her students, from New York, from her father's silence. When she came back in, Jim was standing still, staring at something in the wall. "Miss Monroe," he said, "you need to see this." There, nestled between 2 studs in the wall cavity, was a space barely the size of a shoebox. Inside, it was a doll. Claire stepped closer, heart ticking faster. The doll was old. Porcelain, with a cracked face and painted blue eyes. It wore a faded blue dress with white lace trim. Its hair was made of yarn, now brittle and faded to a ghostly blonde. But what chilled her was the tiny brass tag sewn into the hem of the doll's dress. A name etched in tiny cursive letters, Lillian. Claire's breath caught. The room seemed to narrow. She looked at Jim. "This was sealed in the wall?" "Looks like it. Stuffed in with some old insulation. Someone went to trouble hiding it." They said nothing for a moment. Then Claire reached for the doll. The moment her fingers touched it, a wave of nausea hit her, sudden and strange, like the air in the room had shifted. She closed her eyes, steadied herself, and gently cradled the doll. The tag gleamed faintly under the dying light of the day. Lillian, not a name Claire recognized from her family. Not a name from her memories. Later that night, Claire sat on the front porch with a cup of tea, the doll in a cardboard box beside her. A light drizzle tapped against the roof, and the trees beyond the driveway shivered in the wind. The town of Bari seemed impossibly quiet. Only the sound of tires on wet asphalt from far below broke the stillness. She took out her laptop and searched. Lillian Barr, Vermont missing. And there it was. Lillian Hartley, age 7, last seen July 14, 1970. Claire's tea spilled as her hand trembled. She wiped it off her lap, heart racing. The article was short. Lillian had vanished from her front yard. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses, no body ever found. Her last known location? Maple Street, Claire's address. She looked back through the screen door at the hallway where the doll had been found. That night, she couldn't sleep. The rain turned into a storm around 2 a.m., and the wind groaned against the eaves. Claire lay in bed, eyes open, watching the shadows ripple on the ceiling. The doll sat in the box on the dresser, facing the room. She kept glancing at it, over and over, as if it might move, but it didn't. Of course it didn't. The next morning, the power was out. Jim wasn't coming until afternoon. Claire took the doll to the local Historical Society building, hoping to find some record, something, anything. The woman at the front desk, maybe 75 years old, with large glasses and a kiss, went still when Claire said the name. "Lillian Hartley?" she repeated. "Dear God, I haven't heard that name in decades." Claire leaned in. "You knew her?" "I was her Sunday school teacher," the woman whispered, touching her necklace. Poor thing. Vanished just like that. One day she was playing hopscotch. The next... Her voice trailed off. Claire opened the box slowly. The woman gasped. "That was her doll. She brought it everywhere." The two women stared at each other. Claire spoke, her voice barely audible. "She was hidden in my grandmother's wall." A long silence. Then the old woman said something that made Claire's skin crawl. "Your grandmother was Eliza Monroe, wasn't she?" The woman's lips pressed into a line. She looked away. "There were rumors back then, but no one ever had proof." Claire's voice broke. "Rumors of what?" The woman didn't answer. Claire left the building with more questions than answers. The rain had stopped. The clouds had pulled apart like torn fabric, leaving behind a pale sun. Back at the house, she stepped through the door and froze. The doll was no longer in the box. She spun around, scanning the room. Then she saw it. It was sitting upright in the middle of the living room floor, where Claire hadn't left it. But someone had. Or something. Her throat went dry. Her feet stayed rooted, and then a knock at the door, 3 slow knocks. She turned, opened it, and standing on the porch was a woman. Gray hair, pale eyes. She looked familiar in a way Claire couldn't place. "You don't know me," the woman said, "but I know what your grandmother did." The knock still echoed in Claire's mind long after the woman had gone. Her name was Eleanor Hartley, Lillian's older sister. She was 11 when Lillian disappeared. Now she stood on Claire's front porch, holding a folded envelope and a plastic grocery bag that rattled with old paper. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook. She hadn't come to accuse Claire. She'd come because the doll had resurfaced, because something about it shattered her quiet exile of 40 years. "Everyone thought she ran off," Eleanor had said, her eyes cast toward the floorboards of Claire's porch. "But I never believed it. I knew something happened in this house. I just didn't know what." They sat in the kitchen, tea untouched, the doll between them on the table. Eleanor didn't look at it. She left an hour later, but not before handing Claire the envelope. Inside was a grainy black and white photo of 2 little girls in Sunday dresses, Lillian and Eleanor. The doll was in the photo too. She called her Rose, but the name stitched on the hem, that was her real name. Lillian said the doll told her that. Claire didn't sleep that night either. Instead, she walked the halls of the house with a flashlight, pausing in doorways, trying to feel the weight of what the walls might remember. When the light hit a dusty mirror in the hallway, she saw her own face, exhausted, hollow-eyed, her dark hair tied in a messy knot, the same cardigan she'd worn for 2 days. She didn't look like herself, but then again, she hadn't felt like herself in months. Back in New York, she'd been a professor of American history at Hudson College. Tenured, respected. But she'd stopped feeling anything in the classroom. Her lectures had become robotic, and her students had noticed. It started after the divorce. 3 years ago, her husband, Mark, left. No dramatic affair, just distance. And then silence, like a light slowly dimming. Claire didn't fight it. Maybe she even welcomed it. They had no kids, no real connection anymore. Just echoes of who they once were. After the divorce, she moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, threw herself into teaching, but the emptiness followed her like a shadow. She tried therapy, dating apps, writing a book about mid-century American urban planning, but nothing stuck. When the letter came about her grandmother's death and the inheritance, she took it as a sign, a break, a chance to do something physical, tactile. She packed 2 suitcases and drove up to Vermont. She hadn't been back since she was 14. Her grandmother had been a complicated woman, Eliza Monroe, strict, cold, almost theatrical in her propriety. Always wore perfume that smelled like lilac. Claire remembered sitting at her knee as a child, being told to keep her elbows off the table, and to never ask questions that didn't concern her. Her father, Walter Monroe, had inherited the same silence. After her mother died in a car accident when Claire was 8, Walter withdrew from life almost entirely. He buried himself in work at a local bank and left Claire with relatives more often than not. There was never warmth between them, just the rigid structure of obligation. Claire hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Now every creak of this house whispered of things unsaid. Every photo, every piece of furniture, frozen relics of a family that functioned on distance. 2 days after Eleanor's visit, Claire received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single piece of lined paper with shaky handwriting. If you want answers, look under the attic floorboards, just past the trunk. That night, flashlight in hand, Claire climbed the attic stairs. It was a narrow space, cluttered with old furniture and boxes sealed with yellowing tape. The air was thick with dust and cold. The trunk was easy to find, leather cracked at the edges, with brass buckles that snapped open like gunshots in the silence. She pushed it aside. The floor creaked. She knelt, tapped her knuckles across the wood, listening for hollowness. 10 minutes passed before she heard. She pried it up with a screwdriver. Inside, a small metal box. Locked. She carried it downstairs and left it on the kitchen table. For 3 days, she didn't touch it. She read old newspaper clippings instead. Dug through town archives at the library, met with Jim to discuss drywall and insulation. She told herself the doll meant nothing, that the letter was a prank, that the box was probably empty, but the feeling never left her. The feeling that something was watching, that the house was holding its breath. On the 4th night, the power went out again. She lit a candle, opened the junk drawer, found her grandmother's old sewing kit, and a tiny pair of scissors. She cut the lock. Inside the box, photographs, a child's drawing, and a letter. The drawing was crude, a house with stick figures, a son, a girl, and a doll. One figure had an X over its face. The letter was handwritten in neat cursive. If you're reading this, it means you've found what I couldn't bury forever. I didn't kill her, but I know what happened to Lillian Hartley, and I know who did. Claire read the letter 5 times. Her hands were trembling. It was signed, Eliza Monroe, her grandmother. She folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and felt tears prick her eyes. There was so much she didn't know, so much no one had ever said. Why hadn't her father told her? Why did everyone pretend the past was buried? She called him. No answer. She called again. She stared at her phone. then opened the contacts list, found a name she hadn't dialed in years. Aunt Beverly, her grandmother's sister. She lived in Montpelier, just 20 minutes away. Claire hesitated, then the line rang and rang. Finally, "Hello, Claire." "Aunt Bev, it's Claire." "I was wondering when you'd find that box." Claire's chest tightened. "You knew?" "I helped Eliza hide it. She was afraid. We all were." Another pause. "The truth," Beverly said, "and your father." Claire sat down. The room spun. Everything she thought she knew was unraveling. "I need to see you," she said. Beverly's voice was steady. "Then, come tomorrow. There's something else you need to see." When Claire hung up, the candle was nearly burned to the base. The doll still sat silently on the dresser, its painted eyes catching the flicker of light. She lay in bed that night, the letter on the nightstand, her thoughts racing about her father, about her grandmother, about a missing girl from 1970, and about a silence that had lasted too long. But tomorrow she would break it. The next morning Claire drove through the fog. Montpelier was quiet, cloaked in early mist that clung to the roads and made the streetlights glow like ghosts. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The letter sat folded on the passenger seat. Her chest ached with anticipation, and something darker, dread maybe. Beverly lived in a modest single-story home on the edge of town, tucked between a line of bare trees and a small frozen creek. The house looked untouched by time, pale yellow siding, a white mailbox, and a porch swing that creaked slowly in the wind. Beverly opened the door before Claire knocked. She was shorter than Claire remembered, thinner, but her eyes hadn't changed. Sharp, scanning, always watching. "Come in," she said. The house smelled of cinnamon and wood polish. Faint music played from a record player in the corner, some jazz tune from the 60s. Claire noticed picture frames lined up on the mantel. Wedding photos, faded portraits, childhood school pictures. Beverly poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from Claire at the dining table. "I suppose you have questions," she said. Claire nodded. "Too many." "Then listen." About the summer of 1970, about the neighborhood children who played hopscotch, about the Hartley sisters, Eleanor, shy and studious, and Lillian, lively and wild-hearted, about how Lillian would run barefoot across lawns with her doll, Rose, singing songs to the wind, and about how she disappeared. It happened fast, Beverly said. One day she was here, the next gone. And the town changed overnight. Claire leaned forward. "Why would my grandmother hide that letter?" Beverly looked down. Her fingers trembled slightly as they held the teacup. "Because she was protecting someone," Claire's breath caught. "Who?" Beverly didn't answer directly. Instead, she stood and walked into the hallway. A moment later, she returned with a box. She opened it and pulled out a diary, brown leather with a cracked spine. Eliza's. She slid it across the table to Claire. "I found it after she passed. I haven't read it all. Some pages are missing, but what's there is enough." Claire opened it. The pages were filled with her grandmother's cursive, controlled, delicate. Most of it was mundane, recipes, weather, daily chores. But on one page, the ink was darker, sharper, the words, July 15th, 1970. "She came here, the little one. She was crying. Walt was... I told her to go home, but she didn't." Claire froze. "Walt?" she whispered. "My father?" Beverly nodded slowly. "He was 14 at the time, quiet, always in the woods, came home dirty, angry." Claire felt her heart slide sideways in her chest. "He said he found her bracelet," Beverly continued, "a few days later. Said he was just trying to help. But Eliza..." She didn't believe him. Claire stared down at the page. She flipped forward. Another entry, weeks later. "He won't speak about it, won't say where he was. But the doll was in his room." She closed the diary. A sick feeling spread through her, cold and electric. Beverly reached into the box again, pulled out something small wrapped in tissue. A child's bracelet, faded blue beads, one letter on each. Lillian. Claire's breath left her. Beverly's voice dropped to a whisper. All these years. Claire sat back, staring at the bracelet on the table. Her father had never mentioned any of this. The doll, the letter, the box. She had to see him. That afternoon she drove to Rutland, where her father now lived alone in a retirement community. She hadn't seen him in over a year. She buzzed the front desk, signed in, and knocked on the door to apartment 212. It opened slowly. Walter Monroe stood in the doorway, thinner than she remembered. His hair was gray, his eyes clouded by time. He blinked at her. "Claire?" She nodded. "Hi, Dad." A long pause, then, softly, "Come in." The apartment was sterile, beige, furniture with plastic covers, the faint smell of instant coffee and disinfectant. They sat in silence for a few moments. Claire held the bracelet in her hand. She set it on the table between them. Walter's eyes fell to it. He didn't speak. "I found it in Grandma's attic," Claire said, "next to a letter and a diary." He looked away. "I know about Lillian Hartley." A tremor passed through his jaw. "She was in our house," Claire continued. "The doll was in the wall." Still he said nothing. Claire's voice cracked. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Walter stared at the floor. Then finally, "I don't remember." She sat back, stunned. "That's it?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "I was a kid. I don't know what happened. I remember playing in the woods. I remember her laughing. Then, nothing. Like something cut the film." Claire's voice was bitter. "You found her bracelet." He nodded slowly. "I buried it. I was afraid. Everyone was watching." Claire stood. "You were the last person to see her." He didn't respond. She walked out. That night, back at the house, Claire couldn't sleep. She replayed the conversation over and over. Her father's vacant stare, his half-denials, the way his hand shook when he saw the bracelet. At 3 a.m., she lit a candle and went back to the attic. She pulled up more boards. Dust filled the air. Another box. Inside, photographs, this time of children. Some were labeled, others not, and a cassette tape. She found an old player in the basement. She pressed play. At first just static, then a voice, faint, young, a girl. "My name is Lillian. I'm 7. I live on Maple Street. Today I played with Rose. I went to Claire's house. Her grandma gave me cookies." Claire's blood turned to ice. The recording continued. "Walt said I could see his treehouse. But it's dark. I'm scared. He said..." Click. The tape ended. Claire sat in the dark, staring at the recorder, heart pounding. Walt, her father. She curled into a ball on the floor and cried. She wanted to believe he was innocent. But the house kept whispering otherwise. The next morning she drove to the sheriff's office. She asked to see old case files. The deputy on duty, a woman named Julia, pulled up the records. Thin, sparse, one report, one newspaper clipping, no sign. Claire handed her the cassette. Her face changed. She called in a detective. Things moved quickly after that. DNA samples were tested. The doll was taken into evidence. The house became a crime scene. And Claire became a question no one could answer. Was her father a suspect? Or a boy, caught in something darker? But that wasn't the only question, because when the forensics team examined the walls of the Monroe house, they found something else. Behind the insulation, deep in the back corner of the wall cavity, were 2 tiny shoes, size 10 children's, caked in dust, and they took her father in for questioning. It wasn't an arrest. Not yet. But it felt like one. Claire sat outside the sheriff's office in her car, watching the snowfall thicken on the windshield. She couldn't feel her hands. The radio played softly, static between stations. The world felt unreal, like she was watching it through a fogged pane of glass. Julia, the deputy, had called that morning. Forensics confirmed that the doll, the bracelet, and the shoes were old, likely from the late 1960s. DNA testing was underway, but the shoes had a dried sample too degraded for certainty. Walt Monroe had voluntarily agreed to talk. Claire didn't go in. She just waited. It was 2 hours later when the door opened and her father stepped out, his shoulders hunched against the cold, his breath misting in the air. He didn't look at her, just kept walking toward the parking lot. His steps were slow, dragged. Claire stayed where she was. She wasn't ready. Inside, Detective Harris met her with tired eyes. A large man, probably in his early 60s, with a voice like gravel and a gaze that didn't blink easily. "He's not talking much," Harris said. "Keeps saying he doesn't remember, that he was young." Claire nodded. "Is that believable?" Harris tilted his head. "People block out trauma, especially kids, but there's a difference between forgetting and hiding." Claire exhaled. "What happens now?" "We dig." And so they did. Claire opened up everything, her grandmother's boxes, the attic, the basement, every drawer, every file cabinet. She combed the local library and historical society records. She talked to neighbors, teachers, elderly residents who still remembered that summer. A name kept surfacing: Charlie Bennett. He'd lived next door to the Monroes in 1970, was 17 at the time. Now, in his late 70s, Charlie lived in a trailer on the outskirts of Barra, surrounded by old cars and stacks of firewood. Claire visited him on a Tuesday morning, snow still fresh on the gravel road. He answered the door shirtless, a red flannel tied around his waist. "You're Eliza's granddaughter," he said without greeting. Claire nodded. "You knew her?" "Everybody knew Eliza." "Do you remember Lillian Hartley?" Charlie squinted at her. "She was the little one, right? Big eyes, ran with that doll." "Yeah, I remember." Claire took out a photo. Charlie looked at it, then shook his head slowly. "I told 'em back then. Told the cops. I saw her that day, running from the woods, crying." Claire's chest tightened. "What woods?" Charlie pointed east toward a dense patch of trees behind the old Monroe property. "There's a tree out there. Big one. Split in the middle. Walt used to climb it all the time. Said it was his castle." Claire leaned forward. "Did you see anything else?" Charlie scratched his chin. "I saw her run, then nothing. Next thing I knew, there were cops all over." Claire asked more. He didn't say much else, but she had enough. That afternoon she went into the woods. Snow clung to her boots. Branches creaked in the wind. The deeper she went, the quieter it became, like the air was listening. Then she saw a tree, old, massive, twisted like a storybook monster. Its trunk had split into a natural cradle, wide enough for a child to sit in. She climbed into the hollow. It smelled of sap and soil, and something else. She pulled out her phone's flashlight and scanned the crevice. There, half buried under old leaves and snowmelt mud, was a small wooden box. She pried it out. Inside, a girl's notebook, water-damaged, faded, but legible. Lillian Hartley was scrawled on the inside cover. Claire opened it. The first pages were childish, doodles, songs, thoughts about her sister, her doll, then a drawing of the Monroe house, of Walt, of the tree, and of something else, a door under the ground. Claire stared at it. She flipped the page. One word: trap. That night she brought the journal to Julia. They scanned every page. The last entry was dated July 13th, 1970. "Walt showed me the door. It's under the dirt. He said it's a secret, but he got mad when I asked about the other girl." Claire blinked. "What other girl?" No answer in the journal, no name, just the page, just the word. Other. The next morning, Claire dug. The backyard was frozen. Jim came to help. Together they pulled up grass, shoveled snow, broke through ice-hardened soil. Near the tree they found concrete, a cellar door sealed with rusted. They called the police. Julia and Harris arrived an hour later with a team. They cut the chains, opened the door. Stale air rushed out like flashlights lit the narrow stairs. And what they found at the bottom wasn't a body. It was a room, abandoned. lined with children's drawings on the walls, blankets in the corner, a rusted can of soup, and something painted on the far wall in what looked like old ink or possibly blood. I was here. They photographed everything, bagged the contents, sent samples to the lab. Claire stood in the snow above, hugging herself. Lillian had been kept here, alive. For how long, no one knew. The press got wind of it. Bara made headlines for the first time in years. Seller of secrets discovered in Vermont girl's 1970 disappearance. Claire started getting letters, messages, some kind, some cruel. One envelope contained a photo she'd never seen. Lillian sitting at the Monroe front steps. The back read, "She was always smiling, until she wasn't." No signature. Detective Harris requested another interview with Walter, but this time something had changed. Walter refused to speak, refused to eat. He sat in his chair at the retirement home, eyes blank, hands folded. Claire tried to visit. He didn't recognize her, or pretended not to. And then another discovery. The yearbook from 1969. Claire had borrowed it from the school library, curious about Walt's classmates. As she flipped through the pages, her fingers stopped. One photo. A girl with dark eyes and short curls. No name listed. Claire turned the page and found the girl again, but this time scribbled over. Someone had crossed out her face with a pen. She brought the book to Julia. An archivist helped cross-reference the photo. The girl's name was Abigail Merton. She'd transferred in from another district that year and disappeared in 1969. No report, no search, nothing. As if no one noticed. Claire called Beverly. "Did you know Abigail?" A long silence. Then, "She came to the house once, just once." Claire's voice trembled. "What happened?" "She never came back." At the sheriff's office, Julia pulled sealed files from the archives. A missing persons report from 1969, never followed up, filed by a woman named Miriam Merton. Claire tracked her down. She was in a hospice facility outside Burlington. Claire drove there. The snow had turned to sleet, slashing against the windshield like glass. Miriam was frail, eyes milky with age. But when Claire said the name Monroe, the woman flinched. She said she was going to meet a friend, Miriam whispered, a boy. She said he had a secret fort in the woods. Claire leaned closer. "Do you remember his name?" "No," Miriam said. "But he had dark hair, quiet, polite. He lived on Maple Street." That night Claire went back into the woods, alone. She stood before the cellar, looked down into it. She imagined Lillian's small hands drawing on the walls, imagined Abigail's footsteps echoing below. Then something caught her eye. A glint of metal in the dirt behind the tree. She knelt, dug, pulled out an old flashlight, rusted, heavy, and beneath it, a necklace with the letter A. She dropped to her knees. She was still kneeling when her phone buzzed. A message from Julia. "DNA results are in. Call me now." The phone slipped from Claire's hand before she even heard the end of the message. She stood in the middle of her kitchen, the necklace with the letter A still clutched in her palm, her heartbeat pounding against her ribcage like it wanted out. She picked the phone back up, hands trembling, and hit redial. Julia answered on the first ring. "It's her." Claire's throat closed. "Lillian?" "Yes. The DNA on the shoes and the hair from the doll both match a relative of Eleanor Hartley. It's confirmed. Lillian was in that cellar. And Abigail? We found something else in the tape recorder, hidden in the battery compartment. A lock of hair, dark, different DNA. We're comparing it now. Early results show a familial link to your father." Claire sank into a chair. Julia's voice softened. "Claire, you need to know something else." She braced herself. "The necklace you found with the A, it belonged to Abigail. Her mother confirmed it this morning. There's a photo of her wearing it." Claire stared at the pendant in her hand. It felt heavier now, like it was pulling her under. She was there too, Claire whispered. Yes. She drove to Beverly's that night, headlights cutting through the mist like blades. Beverly answered the door in silence, already knowing. "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire asked. "You knew about Abigail." Beverly's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know everything." "You helped Eliza hide it." Beverly didn't deny it. "She was protecting him," said. "Wasn't she?" Beverly's shoulders sagged. She thought she was. Claire stepped into the living room. "Tell me everything." And Beverly did. About the day Abigail came to visit, how she was looking for Walt, about how Eliza found her alone in the backyard, waiting. How later that day Walt came home with a torn shirt and scratches down his arm. He said they'd argued, that she ran off. But Eliza never believed him. She confronted him. He cried, swore he didn't hurt her, said he just wanted someone to talk to. But there was something in his eyes, said, something she'd never seen before. And then Abigail was gone. Just gone. No one came looking, no cops. Abigail had no close friends in town. She'd just moved. Eliza told Beverly everything, showed her the flashlight, the necklace, the letter she'd found in Walt's room, never mailed, addressed to Abigail. It was juvenile, messy, but it ended with a sentence that chilled Claire's bones. "If you tell, I'll make you disappear like her." "She wrote that?" Claire whispered. "No," Beverly said. "He did." Back at the house, Claire sat at the kitchen table with the items spread before her. The drawing of the tree, the doll, the letter, the yearbook, the cassette, and the box. She picked up Eliza's diary again, flipped to the last page. There was something scrawled in the margin, barely legible. "I locked it away, but evil doesn't die. It learns to hide." Claire closed her eyes. Her father had hurt Abigail, and possibly Lillian, but how much did Eliza know? And then it clicked. She grabbed the yearbook again, went to the back. There, under faculty photos, was a picture of a woman, young, pale, the school nurse, Eliza Monroe. Claire blinked. She hadn't just been a grandmother. She'd worked at the school. She had access to records, to students, to places others couldn't reach. A memory surfaced. Something Beverly had said long ago. Your grandmother loved order. She believed in silence. And she feared shame more than sin. Aki. What if she hadn't just hidden the truth? What if she helped bury it? That night Claire couldn't sleep. She walked through the house, touching walls that had held secrets for decades. She found herself in the basement. It was colder than usual. She opened the old freezer, empty. Then she noticed something behind it, an outline on the wall. She moved the freezer aside. There, faintly visible, was a seam in the drywall. She pressed it. It gave way. Behind it, a hollow space, a crawl area. Inside, a suitcase. She pulled it out, opened it, and screamed. Inside were children's clothes, photos, hair ribbons, a second doll, and a small blood-stained shoe. She dropped to her knees and saw something else. A photo of her father, age 14, smiling, holding a doll. The police arrived at dawn. They took the suitcase, the photos, everything. Walter Monroe was placed under protective psychiatric supervision. But Claire wasn't convinced he was the only one who had known, because one final item in the suitcase was a sealed envelope. It was addressed to Claire, in her grandmother's handwriting. She opened it with trembling hands. "Claire, if you're reading this, then the house has given up its ghosts. I tried to contain it. I tried to fix what I couldn't prevent. I built walls, real and imagined. I sowed silence into our family, but blood always leaks. I don't know the full truth, only what I feared. Forgive me for what I did. Forgive me for what I didn't do." Eliza. Claire sat alone that night, staring at the house around her. It had swallowed so much, and it wasn't done. Because the final DNA test came in, the hair from the cassette compartment, it matched a third person, not Lillian, not Abigail, but someone else, unknown. Claire brought the file to Julia. They reviewed the data. 3 samples, 3 children, only 2 names. Then Julia leaned back in her chair. "There's one file we haven't touched yet," she said. "One missing child from 1968. Claire's eyes widened. "Another?" Julia nodded. "Name was Daisy. Never solved, never found." Claire's blood ran cold. And in that moment she realized the house wasn't done telling its story. There was still one more child, Ruth, buried deeper than all the rest. The house was quieter now, but not silent, never truly silent. Claire walked its halls as if listening for breath. The wallpaper had been stripped, the floors exposed. The attic was empty, the cellar sealed. What remained was not the weight of secrets, but the shape they left behind. She hadn't spoken to her father in 3 weeks, not since the suitcase. He was now under psychiatric care at a long-term facility, officially uncharged. But Claire had seen what she needed to see. She carried it with her like a second skin. It snowed again that morning, heavy flakes that blanketed the trees. Claire watched it from the front porch, a mug of coffee cooling in her hand. The doll sat on the table beside her, Rose, Lillian's, her face cracked but her painted eyes still bright, watching. The town had changed, or maybe it hadn't. The newspapers stopped printing updates. The reporters stopped calling. Time, as it always did, moved on. But not for Claire, not for the Hartleys. Eleanor came by one afternoon. She stood on the porch in a heavy coat, gloves still dusted with snow. Claire opened the door slowly, uncertain. "I needed to see it," Eleanor said. "The place where it all happened." Claire let her in. They walked the house together in silence. When they reached the basement, Eleanor stopped at the top of the stairs. Claire touched her arm. "You don't have to." They sat in the kitchen afterward, 2 women bound by a girl lost to both of them. Eleanor placed a photo on the table, a copy of the one Claire had seen, Lillian with her doll. "She was everything good," Eleanor said. "And she deserved to grow up." Claire nodded, unable to speak. Eleanor looked at the walls. "You staying?" Claire hesitated. "I don't know." Eleanor nodded. Then she reached into her bag. "I want you to have this," she said, handing Claire a folded piece of lined paper. It was a drawing, a child's scrawl, the Monroe house, the tree, the sun, and 2 stick figures holding hands, one labeled L, the other C. Claire stared at it. "I don't remember drawing this." Eleanor smiled softly. "You didn't. Lillian did. She used to say you were her best friend. You only visited that one summer, but she talked about you for weeks after. Said you weren't afraid of the basement like the other kids." Claire swallowed. Her chest tightened. "She remembered me," Eleanor. "She trusted you." Claire looked down at the paper and wept. She visited her father the next day. He sat by the window in a wheelchair staring at the gray sky. He didn't acknowledge her at first. His hands trembled in his lap. Claire sat beside him. "I remember her," he said. His voice was thin, fragile. Claire froze. She was small, always singing. Claire turned to him. "What happened?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted someone to listen, to stay." A tear slid down his cheek. "I was a boy, and I was broken. No one noticed, not even her." Claire's voice cracked. "Did you hurt Abigail?" He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it. She took his hand. Hollow. "I don't forgive you," but I needed to hear you say it." He nodded. Back home, she found Beverly waiting on the porch. "I'm leaving Vermont," Beverly said. "Going to stay with my daughter in Oregon." Claire nodded. "You were part of the silence," she said. "I know." Beverly reached into her coat and pulled out a letter. "Eliza wrote this to you before she died. She asked me to wait until you were ready." Claire took it. That night, by the fire, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. "My dearest Claire, I failed you, and I failed them. I mistook silence for safety. I didn't see the signs in my own son. I thought obedience was goodness. I was wrong. If you are to inherit anything from me, let it not be the walls I built. Let it be the strength to tear them down. The truth was never yours to carry, but I see now. You were the only one strong enough to lift it. I love you." Claire held the paper against her chest and cried, but this time it wasn't for the past. It was for what came next. Spring came slowly. The snow melted in patches. Claire planted flowers in the front yard, daffodils, lilies, a small rose bush. She painted the porch swing, replaced the curtains. She left one wall untouched, in the hallway, where the doll had been found. She framed the photo of her and Lillian side by side. Below it she hung the drawing, and the necklace with the letter A. On the last day of May, Claire walked into the woods one last time, to the tree. She knelt at its base, planted a cross, and beneath it she buried the doll. Not to forget, but to let go. The wind picked up. It sounded like singing. Claire stood in the hallway again. Same house, same light. But something had changed. The silence no longer felt like a warning. It felt like breath after grief. Still heavy, but honest. She had pulled back the wallpaper, the floorboards, the years of secrets layered between family photos and shut doors. And beneath it all, she had found the truth, or at least enough of it. The rest had been buried with time. Some answers would never come. Not from her father, not from Eliza, not from the woods behind the house or the cold cement cellar below. But she had found something else, a voice, her own. She began writing again. Not history this time, not theory, but truth. The kind that grows from scars. Her book started as a journal, then grew into something more. A memoir of the house, the mystery, the ghosts that were never really ghosts, just people left behind. Forgotten girls, silenced boys, generations of mistakes passed like heirlooms. She wrote at the kitchen table where Eliza once drank her tea. The doll was gone, but the story remained. She titled it, What the Walls Remember. Claire visited Eleanor one last time before she left town. They sat on a bench facing the edge of a thawing lake. The ice cracked gently, like it too was trying to let go. "I think she forgave you," Claire turned. "Lillian?" Eleanor nodded. "She remembered your name. That has to mean something." Claire closed her eyes. "I wish I could remember her better." "She was just a little girl," Eleanor said. "You were too." They held hands for a moment, and that was enough. Claire sold the house that summer, not because she had to, but because she'd already taken what she needed from it. She left the drawings on the wall, left a letter in the attic for the next owner, left the garden blooming. When she walked out for the final time, she paused on the porch and listened. The wind moved through the trees like a whisper, and for the first time, she smiled. Back in New York, Claire taught again, different now, more patient, more aware. She told her students, history isn't what we memorize, it's what we choose to uncover. She still thought about the house, about the woods, about Lillian and Abigail, and Daisy, whose face she never knew. But she no longer dreamed of the basement. She dreamed of the swing, of laughter, of Lillian drawing stick figures on yellow paper. One evening, months later, she received a package. No return address. Inside, a cassette tape, labeled only with one word, play. She borrowed a player from the university archive, inserted the tape, pressed play, static, then music. A child's voice began to sing, off-key, joyful, familiar. Claire smiled. It was her. She must have recorded it as a child. Then another voice, also young, also familiar. "Claire, do you want to play house?" "Lillian." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. She hadn't remembered this. A moment lost to time, now returned like a gift. The recording ended with giggles. She walked home under gold. Autumn had begun to settle across the city. She passed children on scooters, dogs barking at squirrels, an elderly man sweeping leaves from his stoop. And she realized the world keeps moving, but what we uncover in the stillness, what we dare to listen to in the silence, can change everything. She stopped on her front steps, looked up at the sky and whispered, "I remember you." 3 weeks after the tape arrived, Claire received a letter. It came in a cream-colored envelope, no handwriting on the outside, just her name, typed in small black letters. Inside, on textured paper, were only a few words. "Thank you for not giving up. J.R." She didn't know who it was from, Julia Rivers maybe, or some. She showed it to no one. Some messages are meant to be held quietly. Claire began attending a support group in the city, survivors of unresolved crimes, people who had lost siblings, daughters, mothers, neighbors to silence. Most never got closure. Some had spent years tangled in justice systems that had no language for grief. Claire didn't speak the first 2 sessions. She just listened. An elderly woman with red-rimmed eyes said, "The past has fingerprints. We just don't always see them right away." A young man spoke about his brother's disappearance. "I keep his backpack. It still smells like him. That's all I have." Claire found herself writing their words down later, in the margins of her manuscript. Their grief became part of her healing. Pain shared became less sharp. Not smaller, but somehow lighter. She visited her father one final time. He had stopped speaking entirely. The nurses said he sometimes whistled a tune they didn't recognize. Claire did. It was the song from the tape. He didn't respond when she spoke, didn't flinch when she touched his hand. But as she stood to leave, he turned his head slightly. Just enough. She paused. He whispered one word. "Sorry." It was too late. But it was still something. Beverly sent her a postcard from Oregon. It was a picture of a field of wildflowers. On the back, in cursive, "I'm learning to sleep again. Thank you for making me open the door. Love, Aunt B." Claire placed it on her refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cardinal, her grandmother's favorite bird. One morning, Claire took a walk through Prospect Park. The leaves were starting to turn again. She passed a group of school children on a field trip, all wearing bright orange shirts and tiny backpacks. One of them dropped a mitten. Claire picked it up and returned it to the teacher. The child looked up at her and said, "Thank you, Miss Claire." Claire froze. The teacher smiled. Claire blinked. Yes, maybe. But she looked back at the boy once more, and for a split second, she could have sworn he had Lillian's eyes. She finished the book in December. Sent the final manuscript to her agent with no expectations. But it was picked up within a month. The publisher called it haunting and humane. They asked if she'd consider a follow-up. She wasn't sure. Some stories are told once, and then they rest. The house was sold to a couple from Massachusetts, young, expecting their first child. They asked Claire what the place was like. She told them the truth. It's old, but it knows how to hold memories. They smiled, not quite understanding. She left a letter in the attic for them, too, different from the first. This one said, "If the walls ever whisper, listen. They don't speak often, but when they do, it's never without reason." She kept one thing from the house, a chipped teacup, Eliza's. It sat on her windowsill in Brooklyn, filled with soil and holding a tiny sprout of rosemary. When she passed it each morning, she'd touch the leaf gently and inhale. It smelled like time, fresh and old at once. Years later, at a college lecture, a student asked her, "Do you believe some houses are haunted?" Claire smiled gently. "No," she said, "but I believe some houses remember." And in the quiet that followed,